The history of Bhutan from ancient kingdoms to a modern Himalayan state. Bhutan, a small landlocked country nestled in the eastern Himalayas, is known for its unique approach to governance, emphasizing gross national happiness (GNH) over conventional economic indicators. With a rich history influenced by Tibetan Buddhism, Bhutan has evolved from ancient tribal kingdoms into a modern constitutional monarchy, maintaining its independence while carefully managing its environment, culture, and spiritual traditions. Ancient tribes and early inhabitants. Evidence of early human settlement in Bhutan dates back to around 2000 BC, based on the discovery of ancient stone tools, weapons, and remnants of habitation. The early inhabitants of Bhutan were likely part of larger, loosely organized tribal communities that spread throughout the Himalayan region. These early communities practiced animistic religions, worshipping nature spirits, mountains, and rivers. The rise of Tibetan culture and Buddhism, however, would eventually have a profound impact on Bhutan's development. Situated between powerful regions, Bhutan's mountainous landscape allowed it to maintain a degree of isolation, fostering the growth of a distinct cultural identity. The arrival of Buddhism and the influence of Tibetan culture. The history of Buddhism in Bhutan can be traced back to the 7th century CE when Tibetan influence started spreading throughout the region. According to Bhutanese tradition, Guru Padmasambhava, known as Guru Rinpoche, visited Bhutan in the 8th century. A revered figure in Bhutanese culture, Padmasambhava is believed to have subdued evil spirits and introduced Tantric Buddhism to Bhutan, laying the spiritual foundation for the kingdom. The spread of Buddhism helped unify various tribes under a shared faith and cultural identity. Over time, the unique form of Vajrayana Buddhism practiced in Bhutan became the dominant spiritual practice, influencing not only religious life but also the country's social, artistic, and political structures. This early introduction of Buddhism gave rise to a tradition of monasticism and a culture deeply intertwined with religious rituals, art, and architecture. The Tibetan influence continued to shape Bhutan, especially as Tibetan lamas and scholars traveled to Bhutan, establishing monastic centers and temples. In particular, the arrival of Lam Ngawang Namgyal in the early 17th century would transform Bhutan's religious and political landscape. Unification and the role of Zhabdrung Ngawang Namgyal. In the early 17th century, Bhutan's future was marked by the arrival of Zhabdrung Ngawang Namgyal, a Tibetan Lama from the Drukpa Kagyu school of Buddhism. Fleeing political conflicts in Tibet, Ngawang Namgyal arrived in Bhutan in 1616 and set out to unify the region's various fiefdoms under a centralized authority. Known as the Zhabdrung Rinpoche, he is widely regarded as the founder of modern Bhutan. Ngawang Namgyal's leadership was both spiritual and political. He established a system of governance that fused religious and civil authority, creating a dual system called the Chosi. Under this system, power was divided between the Desi secular leader and the Jikhenpo religious leader. Ngawang Namgyal also initiated the construction of Zhong's fortified monasteries that served as centers of both administration and religion. These Zhongs became symbols of Bhutanese sovereignty and helped solidify a unified national identity. Zhabdrung Ngawang Namgyal's efforts were instrumental in shaping Bhutan as a distinct nation, especially amid external pressures from neighboring Tibet and regions in India. His unification efforts laid the foundation for Bhutan's independence, and even after his death, his legacy continued to inspire future leaders. Isolation and preservation of Bhutanese identity. Following the passing of Ngawang Namgyal, Bhutan entered a period of relative isolation from the outside world. This isolation allowed Bhutan to preserve its unique culture, language, and Buddhist traditions, even as its neighbors underwent significant changes. During this time, Bhutan maintained its independence by fostering close ties with Tibet, yet avoided becoming entangled in regional conflicts. However, conflicts arose intermittently. In the late 18th century, Bhutan was involved in territorial disputes with British India, particularly over the regions of Assam and Cooch Behar. The British interest in Bhutan grew due to Bhutan's strategic location and its influence over Himalayan trade routes. The Duars War in 1864–1865 ended in Bhutan's defeat, and the Treaty of Sinchala in 1865 ceded the Duars region to British India in exchange for an annual subsidy. Establishment of the Wangchuck dynasty and modernization. In the early 20th century, Bhutan underwent a significant transformation with the establishment of the Wangchuck dynasty. Amid internal conflicts and external pressures, Bhutanese leaders sought stability and unity, leading to the rise of Ugien Wangchuck as the first hereditary king of Bhutan in 1907. The establishment of the monarchy marked a turning point, as Bhutan embraced a more centralized form of governance. Under Ugien Wangchuck's reign, Bhutan maintained a policy of limited contact with the outside world while fostering relations with British India. His reign also brought stability, and he pursued policies to modernize Bhutan's administrative structures. Upon India's independence in 1947, Bhutan signed a treaty with the newly formed Indian government, recognizing Bhutan's sovereignty while granting India a guiding role in its foreign affairs and defense. Bhutan's path to modernization and the introduction of gross national happiness. The reign of King Dorji Wangchuck, the third king of Bhutan, marked the beginning of significant modernization efforts. Dorji Wangchuck introduced a series of reforms aimed at modernizing Bhutan while preserving its unique heritage. In the 1960s, Bhutan abolished serfdom, introduced a national education system, established a judiciary, and began building infrastructure, including the first paved roads and hospitals. Dorji Wangchuck is often considered the father of modern Bhutan for his efforts to transition Bhutan into a modern state. One of the most impactful developments came under the leadership of King Sinju Wangchuck, the fourth king, who introduced the concept of gross national happiness GNH in the 1970s. GNH was designed as an alternative to GDP, focusing on holistic well-being, environmental conservation, cultural preservation, and sustainable development. This philosophy has shaped Bhutan's policies and attracted global interest, making it a pioneering model for development. In 1971, Bhutan joined the United Nations, marking its official entry onto the world stage. Throughout the latter half of the 20th century, Bhutan carefully balanced modernization with a commitment to preserving its Buddhist traditions and environmental resources. Transition to democracy and Bhutan's constitutional monarchy. In 2008, Bhutan underwent a historic political transformation when King Sinju Wangchuck voluntarily abdicated in favor of his son. King Kheser Namgyal Wangchuck, and implemented reforms to transition Bhutan into a constitutional monarchy. This move established Bhutan as a democratic state, with power shared between the monarchy and an elected parliament. The new constitution of Bhutan enshrines GNH as a guiding principle and aims to balance development with the preservation of Bhutanese culture and the environment. Bhutan held its first parliamentary elections in 2008, followed by subsequent elections that have seen a peaceful and smooth democratic process. Bhutan has managed to navigate the complexities of democracy while maintaining strong cultural values. Its political system combines elements of traditional monarchy and modern democratic governance, making it unique among nations. Contemporary Bhutan, challenges and achievements. Today, Bhutan faces the challenges of balancing modernization with its commitment to GNH and environmental conservation. The country has prioritized carbon neutrality, and its constitution mandates that 60% of its land area remains forested. Bhutan is also a global leader in conservation, with extensive protected areas and efforts to preserve its rich biodiversity. However, Bhutan's economy remains small and largely dependent on hydropower exports to India, agriculture, and tourism. The government has implemented policies to control tourism's impact by limiting the number of visitors and requiring a daily tourist fee to preserve the environment and cultural heritage. Despite these efforts, Bhutan faces issues such as youth unemployment, rural-urban migration, and economic dependency on India. Bhutan's role in the region and the world. Despite its small size, Bhutan has emerged as an influential advocate for environmental sustainability and well-being. The country's approach to development and conservation has earned it respect on the international stage, and Bhutan's leaders have been vocal proponents of climate action. Bhutan's peaceful relations with neighboring countries, especially India, have also contributed to regional stability. In recent years, Bhutan has worked to improve education, healthcare, and digital connectivity while maintaining its distinct identity. The nation's GNH philosophy continues to inspire leaders and scholars worldwide, and Bhutan's commitment to well-being and environmental stewardship remains at the heart of its policies. Conclusion. From its ancient origins to its status as a modern constitutional monarchy, Bhutan has preserved a unique blend of tradition and modernity. Guided by the principles of Buddhism and gross national happiness, Bhutan has carved a distinct path, prioritizing well-being and environmental sustainability. Bhutan's journey reflects the resilience and wisdom of its people, who strive to protect their culture while engaging with the world on their terms.